What's odd is there are people who think Earth is flat,
Right.
but recognize that the moon is round, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the sun are all spheres, but Earth is flat.
It's hard to even begin, actually, to talk about what a flat Earth would be like, because it's just so impossible.
You asked the question, what are some of the easiest ways that you can prove that the Earth is round? Because apparently this is something that we're debating. I have no idea why. That's a hard thing for me to even start talking about, because there are so many proofs that the Earth is round, it's difficult to know where to start.
It's so clearly obvious that the world isn't flat.
Before being indoctrinated into the heliocentric globe lie, what is actually so clearly obvious is that the world is flat and motionless. No sovereign-minded adult or child, without previous exposure to the heliocentric globe myth, would ever find such a thing to be so clearly obvious, because there is no empirical evidence whatsoever to support it. The horizon always appears perfectly flat, 360 degrees around everyone, regardless of altitude. All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon over 20-plus miles high, with only NASA and other government space agencies showing curvature in their fake CGI photos and fisheye lens videos. Thus, what is clearly obvious is that Australians are not hanging upside down relative to Americans on a fantastical spinning ball, and you cannot dig a hole to China and find more sky below you. It requires years of indoctrination using computer graphics, camera trickery, and generations of lying Freemasonic astronauts to make people believe such things. All young children, uncontacted tribes, and others free from globe indoctrination rightly assume the Earth to be a level, motionless plane because it is perceivably, empirically, and objectively so. Only after having our common sense and personal experience of the world completely obliterated by heliocentric brainwashing could one believe otherwise.
I have friends who have been on the International Space Station. They have orbited the Earth once every 90 minutes. I have had personal experience with people that have been up in space and can see with their own eyes that the Earth is round. And of course, we've taken all these amazing pictures from space. They're so beautiful, all those pictures of the Earth. So I don't really know what's going on right now with this Earth is flat thing.
Here, Michelle condescendingly delivers two more examples of sophistry, namely hearsay and another appeal to authority. Because she has some fellow Freemason Eastern Star actor-not friends who claim the Earth is a spinning ball, Michelle wants us to accept that kind of second-hand hearsay as scientific proof. Then she laughs and talks about pictures. Pictures like these, you mean? And these? Michelle was directly asked for scientific proofs of her claim, and the first two she gives are, "because other people say so," and "because there's pictures." Well, Michelle, I know you already know this, but people can lie. Pictures can be faked, and neither of those are permissible as scientific evidence. So why are you dancing around the question with sophistry and condescension instead of just providing actual proof of your claim?
So tell me, Neil, is the Earth flat?
We have video from space of the rotating spherical Earth. The Earth is round.
Thank you for joining us on this episode.
Just like NASA's other spokesperson, Michelle Thaler, Neil deGrasse Tyson's first go-to answer when asked for scientific evidence that Earth is a spinning ball says, "We know because pictures." You mean pictures like these, Neil? Pictures like these? And we have video from space of the rotating spherical Earth, he says. You mean videos like these, Neil? Well, I know you already know this, but pictures and videos like these obvious CGIs can be and are faked, and neither of those are permissible as scientific evidence.
All our physics is constructed now. The physics of orbits, actually things going around the Earth, is all constructed with three-dimensional spherical world.
The physics of orbits of things going around the Earth are constructed for a 3D spherical world. The key word here is constructed. Working mathematical models can be constructed and made to work with any kind of physics or orbits and modeled in 3D, as you can see with modern video games and graphics software. This does not mean that these working physics models coincide with the actual natural world. NASA, in fact, admits over and over again in their mathematical models and official documentation that they are actually making all calculations assuming a flat and motionless Earth, and not a tilting, wobbling, spinning oblate sphere.
And the pictures from space show our world as a globe. And yet somehow, there are some people that still seem to believe that the Earth is flat.
And yet again, when you ask supposed scientists how they know the Earth is a globe, they inevitably offer up the suggestion that pictures prove it. Pictures like these, Dr. Stewart? Pictures like these? And these? I know you already know this, but pictures like these obvious CG images can be and are faked, and are not permissible as scientific evidence.
What's odd is there are people who think Earth is flat,
Right.
but recognize that the moon is round. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the sun are all spheres, but Earth is flat. That's not, something doesn't square.
It doesn't jive, right?
Okay.
So like a magician who distracts you with one hand while fooling you with the other, Neil commits what I call the appeal to the sky fallacy, claiming to provide scientific proof for the shape of the Earth under our feet by looking at a light in the sky. That's right. When you ask scientists for empirical, measurable proof of the shape of the Earth beneath our feet, they invariably, inevitably turn their noses up to the sky and start talking about the shape of things up there. Imagine inviting a contractor over to your house to measure the dimensions of your floor, and he immediately gets out his tape measure and starts measuring all the recessed lights in the ceiling.
This is some sort of strange denial. I don't know where it comes from. And it's something where I keep getting this question. We really need to put this question to bed because we've known the Earth is a sphere for a long time. I actually said this to somebody, I couldn't believe they'd never thought of it, that, with binoculars you can see planets. You can see Saturn and Jupiter, you can see Mars with a telescope, the sun, the moon, everything else you see in the solar system is a sphere. So we're the one thing that is different. And that actually made somebody who was more interested in actually hearing information, that actually got them to think. They're like, you're right. Everything else we take a picture of is a sphere.
And again with the appeal to the sky fallacy. The only place we see spheres in the sky is NASA's CGI photos and videos. When amateur astronomers photograph and record the stars and planets, here is what we see. Are these spheres? Are these spheres? And even if they were spheres, what on earth does that have to do with the shape of the Earth?
So if you want to say Earth is flat, then, for example, lunar eclipses. What's a lunar eclipse? If your face is the brilliant sun,
Thank you.
and this is Earth, and the moon is over here, the sun is always casting Earth's shadow into space. It's always there no matter what.
Right.
So the moon occasionally passes through that shadow. And if you see the shape of Earth's shadow on the moon, it is always round. Always round. If Earth were flat, sometimes you get like a flat shadow.
Right.
And we've never seen a flat shadow.
Right.
To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the sun, Earth, and moon align in a perfect 180-degree syzygy like 3 billiard balls, causing the sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the moon. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the sun and moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the sun and moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the sun and moon are both observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then they are not aligned in a 180-degree syzygy, and it is therefore impossible that the sun could be casting Earth's shadow on the moon. and some other explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, who posited that a third celestial body, known as Rahu, or the Black Sun, also existed, equal in size to the sun and moon. This translucent dark body passed affront the sun and moon during eclipses, causing their lights to dim. But regardless of what causes the moon's lights to dim during lunar eclipses, it has absolutely nothing to do with offering scientific proof of the shape of the Earth.
There was a famous experiment conducted by Eratosthenes.
Tuscany.
And there are two cities in the old world, and one of them, they knew that at 12 noon on a particular day of the year, that the sun was directly overhead and you could see the bottom of a well.
Oh, okay.
How can we use this observation to see if Earth's surface is curved? We needed another well. Turns out we can't see the bottom of both wells at the same time. What might explain this? Well, there are two possible explanations. First, we could have a flat Earth with a sun that's small and close by so that the light hits the second well at an angle. Or second, we could have a curved Earth with a sun that's big and far away so that all the light comes in parallel, but only one well at a time is lit all the way to the bottom.
For his next supposed proof, Neil brings up Eratosthenes, who noted that at noon during the summer solstice in Sienne, the sun cast no shadow and the rays could reach straight to the bottom of his well, yet meanwhile in Alexandria, a vertically standing metal rod cast a significant shadow. By factoring the length of the shadow with his assumed distance to the sun, Eratosthenes recorded a measurement of Earth's circumference close to what heliocentrist astronomers still use today. The fact of the matter is, however, that Eratosthenes' calculations were made assuming the sun to be millions of miles away, so that its rays would fall perfectly parallel even in points as divergent as Sienne and Alexandria. This faulty assumed premise led to his faulty conclusion, which was eventually exposed upon the invention of the nautical sextant. Using sextants in plane trigonometry, by measuring the sun's angle at 2 points on Earth simultaneously and factoring their distance from each other, the Pythagorean theorem reveals both the height and dimensions of the sun. Using this method, the sun and moon have repeatedly been calculated to be approximately 32 miles in diameter, 3,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. High-altitude balloon footage has also filmed lighting hotspots on clouds, proving the sun to be local and acting as a spotlight, and not a burning ball of gas millions of miles away, as supposed by heliocentrists. After Eratosthenes, the globe-Earth theory completely disappeared from philosophical thought and recorded history for almost 2 millennia. Geocentric flat Earth cosmologies continued to reign supreme, with even Eratosthenes himself touted as the father of geography, depicting the Earth as flat in his famous 194 BC map of the world.
So one last thing, which should be obvious, if you pay attention and think about it. If you send a ship straight to the horizon, eventually it begins to disappear until it's no longer visible beyond your horizon. And you should ask yourself, what kind of surface would produce that result?
The ocean,
The
ocean has a ramp.
Seafarers knew this. And so, however flat they would have imagined the Earth to be, they couldn't have accepted it to be completely flat, because otherwise you would never not see the ship. Okay.
His next argument, just like the previous two, comes from ancient Greek philosophers who have been debunked since the time they were presented, even way back then. The fact that NASA's top modern globe proofs are still simply regurgitating long-refuted claims from over 2,000 years ago should raise some suspicion. The fact of the matter is that the law of perspective on plane surfaces dictates and necessitates this occurrence. For example, a girl wearing a dress walking away towards the horizon will appear to sink into the earth the farther away she walks. Her feet will disappear from view first, and the distance between the ground and the bottom of her dress will gradually diminish until after about half a mile it seems like her dress is touching the ground as she walks on invisible legs. The same happens with cars speeding away. The axles gradually get lower, and the wheels vanish until it appears as if the car is gliding along its body. Such is the case on plane surfaces. The lowest parts of objects receding from a given point of observation necessarily disappear before the highest. Now, with modern telescopes and cameras, we can prove this as well by successfully zooming in on ships that have gone beyond the horizon and bringing them completely back into full view, hull and all.
You can see if you go up onto a tall tower or a hill and you see more over the horizon.
Rising in altitude always allows an observer to see further regardless of the shape of the ground beneath them. This is also part of the law of perspective on plane surfaces, but you just showed with your last point that you fail to understand perspective, so it is no surprise that you also believe seeing further to the horizon when rising in altitude somehow means you live on a sphere. Whether you were over a sphere, a cylinder, a triangle, or a flat motionless Earth, rising in altitude will always allow the observer to see further. This is an undeniable fact, and acting like this only happens on a globe is either disgustingly dishonest or incredibly ignorant.
Also, if I just tell you, Chuck, walk due east, okay?
Right,
And don't ever stop.
right,
I just turn around my chair and face this way, and eventually you're going to come back.
right. And you'll probably be about 150 years old. 'Cause I am no Forrest Gump. That is how long it would take me
Forrest
to
Gump.
run the Earth.
There is a popular myth taught to school children, which most adults today still believe, that people in history have traveled in perfectly straight lines, eastwards or westwards, and eventually arrived back at their starting point. It is heralded as proof of the globe Earth, and claimed that hundreds of adventurers since Magellan have completed such successful circumnavigations, but the truth is that no one in history has ever set off traveling in a perfectly straight line and returned back at their starting point. All successful circumnavigations in history, whether by sea or air, have instead followed the same pattern, which is sailing or flying the most convenient route from port to port, stopping for supplies and refueling until a complete circle has been made. Not a single sailor or aviator in history has or could travel only in the same one perfectly straight direction and magically arrive back where they began. This ridiculous lie becomes obvious when critically examined, but when taught to young children, successfully bends and warps their minds into accepting globe indoctrination. Unlike the cardinal directions on a compass rose, north, south, east, and west on Earth are not simply straight lines separated by 90 degrees. North, rather than being an upward shooting arrow, is actually a point, a center point, the center point of the entire Earth, known as the geographic North Pole, situated directly below Polaris, the North Pole star, the only motionless star in the heavens, which marks the exact northern center point of the sky. South, rather than being a downward shooting arrow, is actually every line tangent to the northern center point, or in other words, every straight line extending outwards from the North Pole heads due south. East and west, rather than being right and left facing arrows, are actually clockwise and counterclockwise circles around the pole. The sun, moon, and stars all rise in the east and set in the west, making perfect circles over and around us every day. As you can observe, they travel in a circular westward path over and around the Earth, and do not all travel in a straight leftward direction as suggested by a compass rose. Likewise, navigators since ancient times have used Polaris to guide their ships, knowing that Polaris was the heavenly North Pole, south was traveling keeping your back to Polaris, east meant traveling keeping your left shoulder 90 degrees to the pole star, and west meant traveling keeping your right shoulder 90 degrees to the pole star. All circumnavigations in history have been eastwards or westwards, and never northwards or southwards, because the latter is geographically impossible.
Imagine for a moment that, the Earth was flat. Well, how much thickness does it then have? These are the kind of questions you'd have to ask.
These are also questions you should be asking of your spinning ball Earth, Dr. Clark. How much thickness does your ball actually have? Wikipedia and every elementary school textbook will claim the globe is nearly 4,000 miles to the center, where there exists the alleged source of magnetism in their model. a hypothetical molten magnetic core in the center of the ball, which they claim conveniently causes both poles to constantly move, thus evading independent verification at their two ceremonial poles. In reality, the deepest drilling operation in history, the Russian Kola Superdeep, after decades of work and dozens of broken drills, managed to get only 8 miles down. So the entire ball Earth model taught in schools, showing a crust, outer mantle, outer core, and inner core layers, are all purely speculation, as we have never even penetrated through beyond the crust. So regardless of the shape of the Earth, nobody knows what is beneath 8 miles down. But people like Dr. Clark would rather scoff at flat earthers for not simply believing pictures in textbooks like these without empirical proof.
Okay, you've got an edge. Well, would things fall off the edge?
You've got an edge? You, Dr. Clark, have got an edge on your silly straw man spinning flat circle image, but not a single legitimate flat earther claims there to be an edge. Thanks to the Antarctic Treaty, signed by over 50 countries, it is impossible to independently explore the southern perimeter of Earth to find out how the Antarctic ice terminates. No genuine flat earther knows or claims to know such things. But again, globe minions like Dr. Clark are so convinced of their own strawman arguments that it's clear they have never taken the time to research what real flat earthers actually claim.
Well, how do you generate gravity to make the things fall? What is it that's actually causing the gravity to make things fall off the end?
Again, nothing is falling off the end of your silly fake flat earth edge, but when it comes to the effects of so-called gravity, they are easily explained. Quite simply, objects fall or rise based on their relative density to the medium surrounding them. Apples fall because they are denser than the air, while helium balloons rise because they are lighter. No gravity necessary. This is why raindrops fall down through the air and air bubbles rise up through water. Everything seeks its relative density and rises or falls until settling accordingly. This is why a tiny pebble sinks to the bottom of the ocean, but gigantic cruise ships and aircraft carriers stay afloat on the surface, because even though a pebble is so small, its mass relative to its volume, its density, is more than water, so it sinks. And even though a cruise ship is so large, its mass relative to its volume is less than water, so it floats. If Newton's apple had landed in a puddle instead of on his head, he would have seen the apple only fell through the air because it was denser than the air, but then floated on top of the water because it was less dense than water. Have you ever noticed how it's easier to stay afloat with your lungs full of air than it is when they're empty? Submarines float on the surface when their ballast tanks are filled with air, but when the vents are opened and seawater floods in, they begin to sink as the submarine's density becomes greater than water. Depending what depth they wish to dive, sailors simply adjust the ratio of air and water in their tanks, and when ready to resurface, they blow compressed air into the tanks, forcing the seawater out, lowering the density, and thus causing them to rise back to the surface. We can also prove this fact of relative density by filling a balloon with approximately half helium and half air. Since helium is lighter than the oxygen, nitrogen, and other gases that compose the air around us, filling a balloon with just the right amount of helium to compensate for and balance out the density of the plastic results in a gravity-defying, levitating balloon at equilibrium that neither rises nor falls.
It's hard to even begin, actually, to talk about what a flat Earth would be like, because it's just so impossible.
The flat, motionless Earth is not only possible, it's actual. What is impossible, however, is making that fact known to people who so thoroughly believe the prevailing model first presented to them that they cannot open their minds enough to even question it.
For me, the fact that there's a rise of flat earthers is evidence of two things.
Okay.
One, we live in a country that protects free speech.
That's actually kind of awesome.
And two, we live in a country with a failed educational system.
Ooh, that one hurt.
If there's one thing Neil and I agree on, it is that our public education system is indeed a complete failure. brainwashing vulnerable, impressionable young children with mentally and spiritually damaging pseudoscientific indoctrination. The widespread belief that humans are merely evolved apes clinging to a spinning space ball hurtling around the sun is proof of this. The modern rise of the geocentric level Earth cosmology is a direct response and reaction to humanity finally collectively waking up to countless centuries of uncontested lies and propaganda.